Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unstuck movement. This podcast created for you to break the chains that are holding you back in your life. I'm your host, Rob Z, and today we have the incredible Cliff Ravenscraft on the platform. Maybe the coolest name ever on the podcast. Cliff, I like to launch these episodes with a powerful question so we can get to deep answers that cause great breakthrough. What is the single most important lesson that you've learned through every breakthrough in your life?
Well, thanks, Rob, number one, for having me on. And it's very easy for me to answer that question. The single greatest lesson I've learned in life through every breakthrough I've had, it can be applied. And that is that the results that I am getting in life are absolutely perfect for the system that I have created.
So the system that you create for your life, the results are perfect for that.
Yeah.
Go into a little more specificity on that. So if you have a negative way of approaching things, you're going to have negative results that come out of that. A positive way of approaching things, you have a positive result coming out of that. How does that work?
There's a lot of different levels and layers that could be unpeeled when it comes to this particular quote. But yes, we could take, let's just say the very first year, I had lived an entire lifetime as an employee, and I left all of that security behind. Matter of fact, I was working in a family-run insurance agency owned by my mom and dad, started by my grandfather in 1937. I had been working there for 12 years. I was the sole income earner for my family. My wife's a stay-at-home mom with 3 young kids. But after podcasting as a hobby for 2 years, I decided I'd like to go do this. I'd like to turn my hobby, my passion for creating content that's entertaining, educational, encouraging, and inspirational into my full-time career instead of taking over this family business where I am incredibly lucrative, incredibly successful. It's guaranteed job security. And by the way, I did this in 2008, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, but a lot of people were losing their jobs left and right. And here was this guy right here going and risking everything to turn his passion into a full-time career. So what happened for me is that by the end of the year, I was full-time self-employed as of January 1st, 2008. I had never worked so hard in my life, and there's reasons for that. We may get into it depending on what questions you have and where you want to go in the conversation. But I worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 months without a single day off. Then finally, after 9 months, I decided to take the 1 day a week off, and I had to convince my employer that I would actually make up for that day by working additional hours the other 6 days. By the way, my employer was me. So that was the only way that I could do it. There was lots of limiting beliefs that I had about why I had to work so hard. But here's the situation. At the end of the year, I celebrated with a 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon. And in that 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon, I created 24 one-hour podcast episodes within 24 hours and was publishing them as I was producing them. After that, I celebrated the successful end to my first year by a trip to the emergency room where they discovered I had massive gallstones all throughout my body or throughout my gut, and one stuck in my cystic duct. Was in the hospital, had to have surgery, actually had to have 2 surgeries, almost only got the 1 surgery, and they almost skipped one. I almost died in the hospital. And that was the result of all sort of anxiety, stress, worry, and everything you could possibly imagine, and no sleep, no physical activity, all of those things. And what I will tell you is the result that I got physically in my body where I almost died. That result was perfect for the system that I used throughout the entire year of 2008. It was perfect for all of the anxiety, for the lack of sleep, for the lack of physical activity, for everything that I did. Every decision I made was perfect. It was a perfect system for guaranteeing the destruction of my gallbladder.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So the result of almost dying in the hospital was perfect for the system that I had put in place for all of that. Now, not only did I successfully almost die in the hospital after my first year in full-time self-employment, I also generated a net total income of $11,000 that year.
Hmm.
Significantly less than what I was making as an insurance agent. Significantly less. Now, don't get me wrong, the business was profitable, which many businesses, I don't know if you guys know the stats on this, many businesses are not profitable in their first year. But when I went to my CPA and we did our tax return for the first year, he says, "Congratulations." I'm like, "Congratulations? What the heck? This was the most difficult year financially of my life." Because, but you were profitable. And here's what I will say. The business that I had did generate enough money that it paid for health insurance for my entire family because I was full-time self-employed, and that was expensive, being that we're self-employed, so we were on a special plan, and it was very expensive stuff. I also hired a CPA to do all of my taxes and make sure all of the government stuff is under control because I didn't know what I didn't know there, so it paid for him. It paid for all of my software, paid for a bunch of, inventory on some things and things like that. But for the first 9 months, I drew no paycheck. I was living off of old income from my insurance. I was living off of savings for a little bit, those kind of things. And for the final 3 months of the year, I finally was earning enough to where I could pay myself a little bit each month those final 3 months, and if you add up the total net income after taxes, I brought home $11,000 after working all of those hours. Now, financially, the fact that I only made that much money, that was perfect. Those results are absolutely perfect for the system of pricing that I offered, for the system of invoicing that I did, and for the system of beliefs about my value and all of the different ways that I would earn money and then stop earning money because, it's like, there the way that I thought about money, the way that I managed money, the way that I approached money in every aspect. I created the perfect money management system to work around the clock, nonstop, almost killing yourself and only making $11,000. Today, Rob, I could sell a course. If you too can work around the clock for a year and almost kill yourself and make only $11,000, and I can teach you the 10 or 15 key steps and ingredients and pieces of this formula on how you can do this also.
Exciting. Wow, what a fantastic course to give out to the world. All right, so Cliff, this just to let everybody know, this is the Unstuck movement. These are true testimonies of breakthrough, sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. Make sure you check out connectedleadersacademy.com, an incredible organization of leaders, coaches, authors, speakers who find breakthrough in their lives. So Cliff Ravenscraft is a podcasting pioneer, speaker, business coach, known for empowering people to pursue their passions and transform their lives through podcasting and personal development. And speaking of podcasting pioneer, so you started this back in 2005 when it was incredibly difficult to start a podcast. So I can see and say that that's why the working around the clock was probably necessary, just for all of the legwork that had to be done to be able to create a podcast back then and to be able to help other people create, right? Because it was very difficult at that point in time, right?
Well, okay,
Challenging.
so the answer to the question is no. It was not necessary that I worked around the clock. Was it more challenging, and was it less simple to create content back then than it is now? Sure, but I knew my way around a text editor, and I knew how to hand code an RSS feed, and I knew how to copy and paste the most recent thing, change out the URL of the old MP3 file and put the new one in. While today I could publish a brand new I could actually finish recording an episode, upload it, and have it published to a RSS feed today with the tools that we have within 60 seconds or less. It took me 2.5 minutes back then. So no, it was not required that I worked all of those hours. What caused me to work all of those hours was my beliefs about money. That's what caused me. Here's the situation. I had lived an entire lifetime up to that point as an employee. And prior to being an insurance agent, the most I had ever made on an hourly rate was about $22 an hour. All right. Now, that's not a lot of money. It's more money back in 2000, the early 2000s than it is today. But still, the most I'd ever made was $22 an hour before I went salary and before I had my insurance, that stuff. So when I became full-time self-employed and I'm like, hey, people are saying, Cliff, I'd like to hire you as my coach and my consultant. I was charging people $50 an hour for one-on-one coaching. And I thought, I felt ashamed of that in some ways. I felt guilty for charging. Who on earth am I to ask somebody to pay me $50 an hour when it's like, I remember what I was doing for $22 an hour. I remember putting in hardwood floors. Let me tell you, I remember getting up at 3:00 in the morning, being at the warehouse at Huff Floor Covering in Northern Kentucky at 4 a.m. And then it'd be like 20 degrees outside. We're loading up hardwood, and we'd go to a construction site, and it would be it's like literally below freezing, and we're installing hardwood floors and I'm making $22 an hour. And this is grueling, backbreaking, absolutely difficult, challenging work. And then in the summertime, it's like 98 degrees, pure humidity. We're still in this new construction. There's no AC or anything like that. The windows are open, and we're staining a floor that had just been sanded. Dude, one drop of sweat, one is all it takes. If it hits the floor in that 98-degree weather, we're resanding the whole floor again. We can't stain this floor. That's the kind of work I was doing for $22 an hour, right? And here I am. And here's the situation. I loved podcasting. When I first discovered, it was the only thing I ever wanted to talk about. It's the only thing I wanted to do. Podcast this. I could eat, dream, sleep, everything podcast. I'd go to church on the weekend. And occasionally, I'd walk up to this group of guys and they're like, football this, weather this, golf this. Did you see this in the news? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, guys, let me tell you what happened with my podcast audience this week. And they'd listen to me for about 6 or 7 minutes. They'd ask me a question or two. And they're like, okay, hey, Cliff, if it's okay with you, we're going to go back to talking about sports again. Whatever. Okay. So nobody wanted to talk podcast with me. But here, all of a sudden, people are like, hey, Cliff, can I ask you some questions about podcasting? And I'm like, yes, please. Please ask me questions about podcasting. And they get on the phone. And this is before I started charging for podcast consulting. But people said, Cliff, you've got to let me pay you for this. I'm like, why? And I'm like, no, I'm happy to help you. Seriously, this was incredibly valuable. I should pay you for this. And it took probably about 6 or 7 people saying that before I started to have the idea of charging for it. And then I did start charging for it. And I said, well, what's the price? And somebody said $50 an hour. And I went with it, and I felt guilty. Because here's the thing. I just had somebody who, let's just say they hired me for 2 hours of one-on-one. And I just, and that's $50 an hour. That's $100 that I got for 2 hours. And it was the greatest 2 hours of my week. Up to that point, I'm still in insurance, right? And, I could do all these other things over here. But man, this was the most life-giving 2 hours. And here now I'm supposed to send you an invoice to pay me $100 for the highlight of my week? Who am I? Who does this? So I did not realize this at the time. But Rob, I unpacked this afterwards. I became very familiar with a formula. I have my own modified version. By the way, I picked this up from a book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And inside here, he shows a little formula, and he talks about feelings and thoughts lead to our actions, and our actions equals our results.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I've modified it a little bit because I like to call it the TEAR formula, TEAR. So it's what you believe will determine about whether or not you have tears of joy or tears of suffering. All right. So here's how I define this. The results that we get are determined by the actions that we take. Everything. All right. Our actions will always lead to the results. Take the same action over and over and over again, and it will average out to the same result every single time. The thing is most people think, I know what I need to do. I need to change the actions. If I just change my actions, I'd get different results. Sounds great. What most people don't realize is that the actions that you take are always, without any doubt, are going to be based upon how you are thinking and feeling at that moment. So the
Mm-hmm.
T and the E is your thoughts and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts and your emotions will determine what action you do or do not take. So it's actually your thoughts and your emotions that determine the actions, and it's your actions that determines the results. And so the results are based upon your thoughts and emotions. What I didn't realize back then is my thoughts and emotions were unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
habitual, hypnotic. And so for me, I wasn't aware of why I was consistently thinking and feeling about money. I shouldn't charge this much. This is way too much. I can't believe people are paying me. I feel like I'm taking advantage of others. I had no idea why that was. And then much later down the road, I discovered what causes us to think and feel the way that we do. And it is our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it's not just a belief, but it's a system of beliefs. So remember, I said that the results you are getting are perfect for the system that you've created. Now, we can talk about all of the different parts of the key components of a formula and that system. And like I said, that's one layer. But another deeper layer of a system that I had was that I had a belief system about money that was perfect for staying broke as a business owner. So I'm like, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I think and feel the way that I do? I'll give you a perfect example of this. One time I had somebody, when I raised my rates to $300 an hour, I had somebody who bought some equipment from me. My profit on that order was like $600. And then he hired me for 2 hours to teach him how to set it all up.
Mm-hmm.
And so for 2 hours, which is at $300 an hour at that time, and that's another $600. So I just made $1,200, and that's 2.5 hours approximately of my time. $1,200. I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. Well, I had no worries and no problems paying all of that because at that time, there was a lot of work that was involved in all this other stuff. And I had done some work on my beliefs about money at that point. And I thought I had it all figured out until about 2.5 months later or several months later. This guy had a problem with a piece of his equipment. He couldn't hear people when they called in to the telephone hybrid device, because back then, if you wanted to take a live caller, you would often do it by a landline phone line. And so he says, Cliff, I hate to bother you, but if I can get some time, I need to troubleshoot this thing. The broadcast host, the JK audio, it's not working. And I said, hey, no problem at all. Just so you know, I charge $300 an hour with a minimum of 1 hour. Is that okay? And by the way, my first scheduled availability right now is 2 weeks down the road. Hey, Cliff, no worries at all. Sign me up. Put me on your calendar. Just give me the date and time. And so I gave him the date and time. About a week before we had this scheduled call, I said, hey, I really hate that you're sitting there waiting with this equipment and it's not working. Have you thought about calling this 800 number for JK Audio technical support? They're really amazing. They will support this device for you and tell you what's going on and help you troubleshoot it. And if it's a problem, because it's under warranty, they'll replace it for you. And he says, Cliff, if it's okay with you, I'd like to keep my call with you scheduled, and I'm sure we'll work it out. And by the way, did you notice I'm sitting here taking a client who's agreed to pay me $300 for an hour of my time, and I've just tried to get myself out of that $300 by telling him, why don't you call this? Because in
Well, it
my
sounds like you're also trying to help him and trying to expedite the process so you care.
there is that. There is that. But there's still some deeper layers of still questioning my value. And I'll get to
Mm.
that. So here's the situation. Just like we have Zoom calls today, I used to use a telephone bridge system. I dialed in 5 to 10 minutes before our call. He dialed in 5 minutes before our call. Here's the scenario. He says, here's the piece of equipment that's working, not working. Here's the phone number for it. And I called it with my cell phone. Sure enough, I heard the sound and I instantly like, oh, I know what this is. Do me a favor. Reach behind the unit, unplug the power cable. Did the lights go out? Yes. Okay, great. Plug the power cable back in. Is it plugged back in? Are the lights back on? Great. Dialed the phone number. Hello, hello. Oh, it's working. Awesome. Perfect. Fixed it in less than 90 seconds. I said, when you were out of town, did the power go out? He goes, yeah. Matter of fact, when I came back, the clock on the stove and microwave were flashing. I said, well, what happened is when the power went out and the power came back on, there was a surge that caused a bridge in the crossover circuit inside of the device. That's happened to me 3 times. That as soon as I heard the sound, I knew exactly what it was. This is how you'll solve it. He goes, Cliff, that's amazing. Send me the invoice. And I'm like, well, hey, we've got another hour here. How else can I serve you? No, that's it. Oh man, I am so sorry. I can't believe I didn't think of this. I should, when you said static, I think of something else that I wouldn't call static noise. So, but man, I feel like just you shouldn't have had to wait this long and
Yeah,
stuff like
like
that.
you robbed him.
Exactly. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me serve you. What else can I do? How can I be of any support or encouragement to you right here, right now? He goes, if it's good with you, Cliff, I'd love to just go and do some other things. Just send me the invoice. I said, well, I can't do that. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I just can't. I haven't earned this. You're paying for an hour of my time and I haven't earned it. And he did not understand what it was like. I was speaking a different language. And I'm like, listen,
Because
I
to
can't.
him, you probably were speaking a different
I
language.
was speaking a different belief system language. And I told him, I said, I could not go to sleep and put my head on the pillow tonight with a good conscience if I sent you a bill and you paid me $300 for this.
Hmm.
He goes, well, Cliff, what can I do? I said, just tell other people that it's really good to work with me, and that you're very happy with me. And that's more than enough. And he's like, okay, will do. But are you sure you don't want to send me this? I said, yes, I'm absolutely sure. Here's what I discovered much later down the road, even still. Here's the thoughts and the emotions are obvious, but the beliefs were not obvious until
Hmm.
I finally surfaced them. The first one, that I believed that the harder something is, the more you should get paid to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if the opposite of that is true, the easier something is, the less valuable it is, then the less you should get paid. Everything I was doing was easy. All
To
right.
you.
To me, exactly. But still, that in my mind is like, and that was another belief. Well, doesn't everyone just know how to do this? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer is, well, no. But that wasn't the way that I was perceiving. It's like, this was way too easy for me. I haven't earned this. Give me something harder, something more difficult. The other belief that I had was, the more you hate what you do, the more you should get paid to do it. And I had a lot of supporting evidence in my life prior to this. There are plenty of things. Hey, who wants to work on the weekend this weekend? Nobody. Who wants to get double time? Okay, I'll do it. I hate working on the weekend, but if you're going to pay me twice to do it, double time, I'm going to do it. So I had this belief linked up that the more you hate what you do, the more you should get paid, because you got to pay somebody to do the hard work, the dirty work, or whatever. Well, if this were the case, then I suppose there are some jobs out there that are less than appealing to most of us that should be the most well-paid people out there, but it's not the case. But I wasn't thinking about that. I had the belief, the more you hate what you do, and I loved everything I was doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
that caused a problem. Another key belief, and I'll just stop there. There were more, but another belief that was in this system was, people are paying for my time. they're getting, if they're paying for an hour, they get an hour.
Mhm.
And if they don't get it, if they don't take the hour, then I haven't earned it. And of course, I mean, I know that most people today who have been around in business is like, Cliff, what were you thinking? That's what I was thinking. Those were my beliefs back then. And here's what I will tell you. With that system of beliefs, I will always have the same thoughts and the same feelings. And with those beliefs and those thoughts and those feelings, I will always refuse to send the invoice. And when I always refuse to send the invoice, I will always lead myself towards, these very low income situations.
Really, really good stuff, man. And fascinated. I love that journey you just took us through, because that really paints the picture very well. Because I know that experience for myself, and I'm sure almost everybody watching or listening can relate to that experience and understanding that belief system. So we have to jump into our sponsor real quick for the Connected Leaders Academy. 60 seconds. We're going to come back, and I want to know how you practically changed that from that experience, that aha moment you had, that breakthrough that you experienced. How practically did you change that? We'll talk in 60 seconds.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
All right, Cliff. So you go through that whole process of this limiting belief that you grew up with of you have to work hard for your money, and the more you hate your job, the more you get paid. And you had that breakthrough moment. How did that start to practically change then? How did you start to change that belief system and that limited mindset you had around finances?
There were a couple key ingredients. Number one was mastermind groups. So I started a mastermind group with a client that I helped launch a podcast. His name is Pat Flynn. And he and I have been meeting together every single week since October 2010. And we have since grown that. There are 6 of us in this weekly mastermind group. But I will tell you, spending an hour a week, every single week, upgrading my peer group with people who have elevated already their mindset when it comes to this particular topic and others, it immediately helped reshape and influence the way that I thought and what I believed. So they were showing me by example that many of the things that I believed were not true. Lots of powerful conversations came up in that, and just seeing what they were able to achieve, and then me sometimes having my belief and saying, how do you do that when this thing here, when I believe this? And it's like, well, I don't believe that. And I'm like, how do you not believe that? And we have these conversations, and it's through dialogue. And I do believe, by the way, that the quality of our life is going to be a reflection of the people that we hang around with the most.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, Jim Rohn was very popular motivational speaker back in the day. And he would say that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So one of the most powerful things that I did was upgrade my peer group. So that's one. Another one is I had some incredibly powerful mentors in my life. People like Michael Hyatt, Dan Miller, author of the book 48 Days to the Work You Love, and some other incredibly powerful, very well-known celebrity, in my mind, kind of entrepreneurs in the space. And they would always take me aside and say, hey, Cliff, is there any way I can support you and encourage you on your journey? And I would share with them some of my biggest struggles, some of my biggest hangups. And they would just ask me a couple of questions, and just the amount of clarity that I got from that. And then, of course, I became an avid student of personal and professional development materials, self-help materials. And so I read countless books on various different topics. A couple of books that really helped me specifically with this money mindset stuff One was a book called Thou Shall Prosper by Rabbi Daniel Lapin. It was an incredibly powerful book. And then also, I already mentioned before, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. There's an entire list of new systems of beliefs that you could adopt and work on and work towards replacing anything that conflicts with all of what he calls the wealth files. And then there was this article by Peter Shallard called Why People Want to Pay You More: 7 Reasons Why Doubling Your Rates Will Double Your Success. And I will just tell you, a combination of all of those things just completely rewired my entire belief system. So much so that I got to the place where eventually I'm making, well, I already told you I got up to $300 an hour, but eventually I just got to the place where I just stopped doing hourly and I went into group coaching courses and just brought people in $2,000 at a time. But everything was prepaid upfront. And if you haven't paid yet, we don't work together. So, you know, a situation today, if I had that same scenario with that guy and he would have said, hey, Cliff, you know, I'm running into this issue. I said, sure, well, no problem. I charge X number of dollars with a minimum of an hour. Here's a link to sign up, which, by the way, also would require that the payment be processed before the call is even booked on my schedule. And, you know, I would serve him. And if I served him 3.5 minutes before the call was ready to start, he's already prepaid. And I said, hey, is there anything else I can do for you? And he says, no, man, this is amazing. It's like, hey, well, great. Super delighted to help you. Is if I could ever be of any further support or encouragement to you. And hey, by the way, chances are you probably already know 2 or 3 people who are asking you about your fill in the blank, what that I did for him. And I'm trying not to let people know that I used to teach people how to podcast, but I'll just say it. Hey, you probably know 2 or 3 people who have been asking you about podcasting and asked you how you learned about it. Who do you think I should be talking to next? And I would just ask him for a referral, and then I'd be off with the rest of my day. So yeah, it just radically changed the way that I experience life. And eventually I went from an $11,000 net income year to going into the 6-figure, right around $100,000. Then I hit that 240K. And eventually my best year that I had was a $750,000 year. And that's full-time, self-employed, me sitting here working in the basement of my home with no team and almost no overhead in my business.
I love it, man. And I really want to just say thank you for the transparency on like dollar amounts and things like that. People usually don't mention those sorts of things. They keep those kind of close to the vest. So I just want to honor that you're being so transparent. And this is just such good information because you're right. There are concepts and beliefs that we have that makes sense to us and probably makes sense to people around us. If we're stuck in a limited belief, then we have people around us that follow the same belief systems that we do. And that's why we are having the belief system that we have. And we probably grew up with those belief systems also. We grew up with parents who also saw things that way. They saw things as like the harder you work, the more you're going to get paid. And you should be really like killing yourself to get enough money to support your family, right? That whole concept is definitely, I come from a smaller area in central Pennsylvania. So that concept is really baked into our area, right? Work hard, you get paid for the amount of work that you do and how hard the work is. And that just makes sense to a lot of people. And also made sense as I transitioned my mindset over, right? So being in business now for myself for going on 7 years, transitioning that mindset out of a mindset of having an employer and having somebody who paid me a salary on a bi-weekly basis, working yourself out of that mindset, finding people who think differently like yourself and being like, oh, right, it doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. And I want to go back to something that you said about how easy the thing was that you were doing, right? Because when you really love something and you've spent tons of time doing it, it becomes well, that thing usually is something you're naturally acclimated towards anyway. So it already is kind of easy because you're excited about it, even if it is difficult. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But you forget that these hundreds or thousands of hours that you spent in this thing, somebody else has never spent that amount of time doing this thing. So your level of ease is not their level of ease in any way, shape, or form. Therefore, you have to recognize that to raise your prices. And the value that you're giving somebody might seem like nothing to you. Like you were saying, these things feel like nothing to you. And so but it's everything to them. And this resonates with me so well when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to broadcasting, because this is what I naturally just love to do. And I've probably spent, I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000 hours broadcasting or more. So it's just such a natural thing. And I really value that you're talking about this right now, because I think we all could recognize in our life there is something that we are naturally acclimated towards, that we absolutely love. And a lot of people never chase after that thing. I want to go into like the boldness, going the whole way back to the beginning. You were talking about the boldness that you had, the passion that you had for something. When you're working with somebody and helping to change their mindset, oftentimes they won't even chase after or go near the thing that lights them up and excites them a lot. They won't use that as a form of income, or even think about that thing as a form of income. How did you, first of all, that boldness that you had to leave your insurance job that was making you all that money, and then jump into something that only made you $11,000 a year in the first year back in, what was that, 2008, into making that a full-time thing? Where did that boldness come from? How deep was the passion that led the boldness to make it happen? And how can other people do that?
Well, there are a couple of things that are part of my story that haven't come out. Well, at least one part that hasn't come out. So I told you that I worked for 12 years as an insurance agent selling auto, home, life, business, and health insurance. But what I didn't tell you is that during that same 12-year period of time, I was also an associate pastor of a church. And from the time I was 18 years old, I had this overwhelming conviction that I want to be of service and ministry to others. I want to encourage others to live the life for which they are created to live, from a very faith and spiritual perspective. In fact, I was convinced the reason why I started working in the family insurance agency was because I was a computer geek, and they hired me initially to come work right after I got married in 1996. They asked me, would you come and set up our computers and install, we need a network, and we need to figure out how to bring in what's called agency management software. Their entire agency was paper files and manual rating on paper. So I said, sure, I will come in. Here's the situation. As long as you agree that you'll never try to persuade me to get my insurance license, and you'll never try to get me to stay in the family business, this is not my desire. I want you to know, if I'm ever offered an opportunity to be a pastor of my own church, no matter, again, hear the money mindset, no matter how much less money I would make, you have to give me your full support and blessing to leave insurance to go do what I feel most called to do. And they said yes. So it's important to know that during the same years that I was an insurance agent, I was also an associate pastor, and I was preaching and teaching, performing weddings and funerals, and also leading Bible study groups and leading leaders of Bible study groups. This was my life, being a support and encouragement. So when I started podcasting as a hobby in 2005, and all of a sudden I go from having a blog readership we're digging into some conversation you and I had before we hit the record button today. But I'd been blogging for a decade, and I had only reached about 300 people around the world. But as a result of me dipping my toes into the world of podcasting through some pretty miraculous kind of experiences, I had 27,000 subscribers, my wife and I, around the world, who were listening to our podcast about the television show Lost. And this show had episodes titled All Good Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. And my wife and I just so happened to have some daddy issues from our childhood, and we would talk about how we relate to what's being talked about in the show. There were issues on there talking about finances, and my wife and I would talk about the fact that, gosh, we got married and we were in tons and tons of debt, and we're just weeks away from calling Dave Ramsey and saying we're debt free, except for our mortgage. And we would talk about that. We would talk about our marriage. We would talk about all of these things. And people would write us emails and say, hey, I just heard you and your wife, Stephanie, talk about this. I have a question for you. And I would start hitting reply. And the questions and the things that people were saying to me, Rob, were way more intimate and personal than what most people would bring up on during the weekend in a church service. And I had already come to the place. I told you I became very successful as an insurance agent. And at some point, probably about 7 or 8 years into my career as an insurance agent, that I recognize I'm never going to take over a church one day. I don't care how much money they would pay me. There's no amount of money you could pay me to pastor a church, because it would limit the impact and influence that I would have that I'm having as an insurance agent. And what I meant by that is that I'm sometimes the first person that somebody will call after their daughter was just killed in a car accident, or somebody whose husband just committed suicide, or a home that just burned to the ground or was destroyed by a tornado. And so in that service ministry mindset, I had great impact, great influence with about 17,000 clients in my community here, which was much larger than if I had a congregation in a church. So that's one of the reasons. And so here, all of a sudden, because of the, we start this podcast, we got 27,000 subscribers within our first 3 weeks. By the way, over the course of the next year, we grew that audience to over 60,000, but we launched other podcasts about other television shows, which each had their own audiences. So within a year of me starting podcasting as a hobby, I now have a worldwide community of listeners in the hundreds of thousands. And for those who are listening in audio, this right here is a box with about 200 or 300 thank you cards, postcards, and a bunch of handwritten letters, 3 of which are from people who said, because of you, I chose not to commit suicide. Wow. Because of something you shared in your podcast. And so what we were doing is I would actually have people say, Cliff, I'm listening to your entertainment television show based podcast, but I have a question about your faith. And so I used to answer all of those emails individually, but eventually the same questions were coming over and over again. So I would create a podcast where I could talk about faith. And then people would ask us questions about our marriage. And so my wife and I would create a podcast called Family from the Heart. And so people would ask me questions about business and technology. And I created a podcast called Business Tech Weekly. People started talking about social media and asking me questions about social media and how do you get it from being addictive. And I created a podcast called Social Media Serenity. And so I created all of these podcasts about all of these topics so I could answer all of these questions that were coming in. And so to answer your question, I eventually saw my insurance career as a distraction from what I felt most called to do in this world.
Yeah. And I just love the concept of the ministry goes into the, your ministry becomes the workplace where you work, where you spend your time, right? Taking the gospel into the workplace and into the marketplace of ideas, because I believe, and I imagine you probably do too, like God created us to be entrepreneurs. Like we're created if we're created in the image of God and he's a creator, then we're also creators. We're creative. We got to use our creativity to create things that support and help people thrive. Now, not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur or create something that supports that is their sole income, right? But we all can have something that we believe God has created us to do, that we use our unique gifts in, and through that thing, we empower people, we lift people up, we can point them towards the gospel, and that becomes our place for everything, our hub for everything in our life. And I love that you're bringing that up, because to me, that is such an important thing. And if you don't have your own, like say you don't have your own platform or you're not an entrepreneur, just think about your workplace as that. I mean, your workplace can be that place of ministry. You have an opportunity to do that in all different places of your life. And that goes outside of the 4 walls of the church where, disciples should be, where Christians should be, outside of those 4 walls, lifting people up and helping people, man. So that's really, really important and really, really good. And that's also where that boldness comes from, that expertise. When you know so much about something and you are such an expert in something, then you are doing a disservice to others when you are not helping other people with that thing. You know, you're doing a disservice when you're not supporting others and lifting them up and helping them grow because you have so much expertise in something. Do you agree with that?
At some levels I do, and maybe in the past I might have agreed with it even more. Where I am today, I would say I don't necessarily feel like there is some disservice that I would be doing to others if I chose not to create something around my passion, my knowledge, my areas of expertise. I would say more than anything is that I have to know what my own priorities are,
Mhm.
and I need to know what my values are.
Mhm.
And there may be a number of circumstances and a number of situations where, even though there's an opportunity to go and do this and reach these people for various reasons, and not any that I might want to explain to anyone else, I've chosen not to go do that.
Mm.
And instead, I'm investing my time, effort, and energy in a place that is much higher up on my list of values right now. And that could be for a season, or it could be indefinitely. And so I don't necessarily know. And by the way, I'm not speaking of myself. I'm talking about what I've witnessed from others, because
Mhm.
there are certain people who have chosen not to go and pursue that, but not because they're afraid of it, not because of a limiting belief system, but because their values are just in a different place and they're in a priority. And so I think I might personally just hesitate to say that they're doing a disservice by not sharing with the world their immense expertise and just their skills, talents, and experience. No, they've chosen to put their life force, what God has given them, is invested wisely somewhere else.
Mm.
And I might just think, who am I to be a judge of where you decide to put your time, effort, and energy?
Very
So
true.
so I don't mean to disagree with you. It's just that I one of the things that I recognize is that I used to believe exactly what you just said. It is like, no, how dare you not? How dare you withhold this? It's like I'm 51 years old, and I have been around the block enough to know that we don't always know what's going on in the lives of the people. And sometimes we think we know a lot that's going
Yeah.
on, but I'm privy to a lot of behind the scenes insights into a lot of people's lives, especially as the type of coach that I am today. I do mostly mindset coaching for business owners, but also just random people in life.
Mhm.
And you never know who just a couple of weeks ago was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and is dealing with some stuff.
Yeah, very true, man. And you get that perspective. You have 11 years on me, and I can see what you're saying, because that sort of awareness and that sort of revelation comes with time and experience, and knowing where people are at, and knowing where you're at, and knowing like the things that you might be doing or might not be doing because of things in your life that nobody else knows about. So very true. And that's a great perspective. I really appreciate you including that. Um, I wanted to let everybody know, if they want to find out more about you, they can check out cliffravenscraft.com, which, by the way, that name, I know I already said it, but that is just like the ultimate. I mean, you've got to be proud of that name. That's a name, Cliff Ravenscraft. I love that. So, what
My
call to
daughter
action? Oh, go ahead.
My daughter was embarrassed by that. My oldest daughter, Megan, she was embarrassed by her last name. Dad, I hate our name. I hate our name. I said, one day you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
And she goes, in middle school, she got made fun of all the time, Ravenscraft and all this other stuff. And so, but the thing is I said, just wait until you get into high school, or at least once you're out of high school. I promise you will understand. And she went to college and graduated. And in college, I have the coolest name on the planet.
It is the
And
coolest name.
she just got married in January of this year, and she dropped her middle name, and she's now Megan Ravenscraft Johnson. So she changed her middle name to hold on to the Ravenscraft instead of doing the hyphenated.
Yeah, couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
I always got Rob Wentz to the bathroom, so that one stuck in elementary school, but not so
Yeah.
much anymore. So if they want to find out more about you, man, cliffravenscraft.com. But what call to action would you like to give the audience? What call of action today, if somebody's watching this or listening and they want to get more from you?
Yeah. So I would encourage people to go to mindsetanswerman.com/free. mindsetanswerman.com/free. If you go there, you'll see a 90-second talk of me kind of ripping up 3 $100 bills and throwing them in the trash. And of course, I had just delivered the talk, the story about refusing to send the invoice. Here's what I want you to do, though. If you read the top of that, the headline says, "Give me 60 minutes and it will change your life forever." And it's hyperbole. I know it sounds like sleazy internet marketing, but here's the deal. Put your name and email address into the form. Watch the 1-hour talk. And I promise you, if I don't deliver, you're going to get an email from me says, did you get what I promised? And I encourage you to unsubscribe from my list if this doesn't transform your life. Now, obviously, I brought in the formula. You've already heard that your belief system is what determines how you think and feel, and that's going to determine what actions, and that's going to determine what results. Now, what we didn't get to here today, and it wasn't intentional. I never hold anything back. I would have delivered the entire all beliefs have consequences talk if it would have went in that direction. But here's what's in the rest of that video. Number one, you are unaware of 90% or more of the beliefs that are causing your habitual thinking and emotional patterns. You are not consciously aware of them. You have no clue that you believe what you believe. You heard a couple of things from your dad or your mom or a religious leader or a TV show, something somebody said to you in 3rd grade, and it is stuck there and it is there. And every single day of your life, you're thinking and feeling based upon those things, and you're not even aware that that's what caused that triggered emotional reaction inside of you. So this talk, 1 hour, I'm going to teach you how to discover the limiting beliefs that are holding you back. Number one, how to become consciously aware of what those beliefs are. Number two, I will help you understand what was the source of those beliefs so that you can at least understand this isn't my belief. I picked it up from somebody. I agreed with it, and I've held it to be true. And so you can understand what is the source of it. And then the third thing that you'll learn is how to break up with the belief, how to completely disassociate from it. And it is absolutely essential that you get the fourth step, which is you must take any belief that has been removed and replace it with an empowering alternative belief, and you have to condition it. And if you don't condition the belief and the old thinking patterns will come back. So you have to do all 4 steps. Now, here's the thing. All 4 steps are covered in this video, and it's for free, mindsetanswerman.com/free. One last thing. If you watch the video, the next day you're going to get a thing. It says, did you get what I promised? And it's going to promote the rest of my Free the Dream online course for $197. If you email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com, put free course in the subject line, ignore the click here to buy now button, email me, tell me you heard about me in this live stream and or podcast, I will grant you free access to the $197 course. There's no strings attached, no expectation. I just want to help you create the life you feel most called to live today. If you are not absolutely satisfied with the results that you have, you're going to need to take different actions, and you won't be able to do that unless you start thinking and feeling differently, and you won't be able to do that unless you change your beliefs, and you're not even aware of 90% of them. mindsetanswerman.com/free.
Amazing. Cliff Ravenscraft, so glad we had a chance to connect. So glad I had you here on the platform. Thank you so much for being a part of the Unstuck movement.
Thank you for this incredible opportunity.